Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody for coming today. My name is Grace Rennie, and I am the grant making and administrative specialist here at Arts New Orleans. And we have another outgoing staff member on the call, Daniel O'Connell, who was our grants fellow for the past couple of years. So if you are a current grantee, you may have communicated with him. So thank you, Daniel. And we are here today to talk about the More Joy Community Arts grants that are currently open for applications. So the application is live on our website now. Daniel, could you put that link in the chat to just the CAG page with all the information? And the deadline to apply is June 18th, so about another month. So the mission of the Arts Council of New Orleans, also known as Arts New Orleans, is to improve the quality of life in New Orleans by supporting, activating, and investing in our city's greatest natural resources, our artists, culture bearers, culture producers, and creative community. Okay. That's what I want. Participants. Great. Okay, so the Community Arts Grants Program has been around since 1982. And the More Joy category that we're going to talk about today, I believe, started in about 2018. But so these grants are city money that we as the Arts Council administer to get it to you all. So the goal of this program is to provide support for a broad range of arts activities that take place in and have impact on the residents of Orleans Parish. Within the bigger program, there's two separate categories, New Orleans as Cultural Capital and More Joy. So New Orleans as Cultural Capital are 2-year grants. So that application is only open every other year. So this spring, we are just doing applications for the More Joy category. And the eligibility for both of those is that you have to be domiciled in Orleans Parish and that you can only apply in one of the two categories. So if you are with an organization that currently has a New Orleans as Cultural Capital Community Arts grant, you are not eligible to apply for More Joy on this round, just to say that. So the More Joy category supports incorporated nonprofit organizations producing or celebrating the New Orleans street parading traditions, usually created by New Orleans indigenous cultural groups, such as Black Masking Indians and social aid and pleasure clubs. These funds seek to promote the continued success of street parades, examine the cultural traditions and practices behind these local traditions, and educate youth under 18 in specific traditions such as beading or drumming, and generally bring more joy to the neighborhoods of New Orleans via the street parade. And so for this application period, the grant period is next year, January 1st to December 31st, 2025. So any project you are applying for needs to fall within that timeline. And I'll talk more about this later, but funds are usually available in May. Like we just sent out the first round of grant payments for this year. So you can have activities that happen before that, but you'll basically have to do that on a reimbursement basis because we won't have gotten those funds to you yet. So things that CAG, the Community Arts Grant Program, does not fund include, this applies more to the cultural capital category, but nonprofit arts organizations that have their own granting programs that award over $250,000 each year, city agencies and other governmental agencies, activities that occur outside that allowable grant activity period, which is the calendar year 2025. Also expenses that are incurred outside that grant period of 2025. Non-arts oriented activities that take place outside of Orleans Parish, lobbying expenses, and then this is a sticky little one. If you are applying with a fiscal agent, you cannot use that fiscal agent as a provider of services within your grant. So if the organization you're working with, you could also hire their band to play, that is not allowable as a expense within this grant. And so More Joy funds Black masking or Mardi Gras Indians who parade in the public right-of-way in Orleans Parish on Mardi Gras Day, St. Joseph's Night, Super Sunday, or another specific date. Social aid and pleasure club parades that take place in Orleans Parish, non-motorized parades in the public right-of-way based around a specific holiday, tradition, or event that takes place in Orleans Parish. And exhibits, workshops, and presentations dedicated to the street parading traditions of New Orleans. More Joy does not fund Mardi Gras style parades featuring motorized floats or trackers, parades created for the purpose of promoting a specific product or brand, or parades that aren't licensed or permitted by the city. Before I go into more details, does anybody have any questions at this point? No? Great. Oh, so the timeline. Okay, so applications are due June 18th. You have up until that date to submit. You could submit today. I am happy to answer any questions you have leading up to that date, to review your application if you would like. If you would like me to look specifically at your application, please try to get that to me by like the first couple days of June so that I have time to do that. So the application deadline is June 18th. And then in July, we will convene our grant panel to review applications and make funding recommendations. So starting in August, we will start sending out preliminary recommendation letters via our grant platform Submittable. And you can also reach out to me if you haven't heard or are just anxious to know if you were recommended and they haven't gone out yet. So then those letters will be saying that you've been recommended for funding. And the reason why that is because in November, we then present our grant recommendations to the city, to the mayor, to the chief administrative officer, and to the city council for them all to approve as a part of the city budget for 2025. So that official approval doesn't happen until December. So until that budget is passed, we just say that you are recommended for funding. Once the budget is passed in December, we will email out grant award letters saying you officially have this money, and then it's time to fill out a contract. If you are a new grantee, or even if you just have any questions or uncertainty about the process of the grant, we'll hold an online compliance session in January to go over that. So then contracts go out in January. You get those back to Beam by March. The grant activity period is the whole year of, that should say 2025. And then, as I said, we have to wait to receive the funds from the city before we can redistribute them to you all. So we normally receive that payment in April, and then the first payments to you go out in May. So you will receive those funds in May. And if you want to do programming prior to May, you are welcome to do that. Just be aware that you won't actually have those funds in hand. So we will get those to you as soon as we can. But it won't be until at least May. So after May, I will also send out the final report. So it is not due until January 31st, 2026. But if you complete your activities and you want to submit your final report early, you are welcome to do that. And then once I've received your final report, I can issue, sorry to back up slightly. So in May, the initial payment for your grant will go out. That is 75% of the grant amount. So you'll get that initial payment in May. And then once you submit your final report, either whenever your event is over and you submit that, or by January 2026, we will then issue that final 25% payment of the grant. So you do have to spend 100% of the grant funds, even though you have not received that final 25%. So think of that 25% as definitely being a reimbursement. Great. So these are the allowable expenses under the More Joy category. So artists and musician fees, materials for costumes or props, anything like that, permitting fees, marketing and publicity expenses, teachers, instructors, educators for any sort of workshop in a tradition that you're doing, building suits, beadwork, drumming, anything like that, you can pay the people running those workshops. And who is eligible for these grants? So you do have to be an organization to apply for one of these grants. You can't apply as just an individual. There's a lot of sort of subtypes of organizations you can be. So you can be a nonprofit arts organization with a 501c3. You can be any kind of nonprofit organization with a 501c3. You can be a nonprofit organization that is just incorporated with the state, but without that federal 501c3 designation. And if you are an organization like that incorporated with the state, you can use a fiscal agent to apply if you prefer, or you cannot use a fiscal agent to apply. The main thing is that you do have to have an organizational bank account. So somewhere where we can send the funds that is associated with your organization. So that might be why you use a fiscal agent if you are, incorporated as a nonprofit, but you don't have an organizational bank account. And then the application process itself. So we use a platform called Submittable. This is a screenshot of it. You can see the link that's also in the guidelines. Daniel, can you put the direct link to Submittable in the chat?
Sure thing.
Thanks. So it is very user-friendly. You do have to set up an account. So that's just something to know, and then you'll be able to access the grant application and fill it out. Submittable is very reliable. Like, it will save your information in there as you go. I personally, whenever I'm applying for a grant in a portal, like to draft everything in a separate Word doc before I put it into the application, but that's just a personal preference, something I like to do because internet gremlins sometimes do things, but we've actually never had a problem with that with Submittable. It's been very reliable. And so this is outlining the information that's in the application. So general information about your organization, name, address, contact information, all that good stuff. Information about your fiscal agent, if you're using a fiscal agent. The demographics of the community your organization serves, project details about what you're proposing, information about the service providers involved. So any musicians you're contracting, workshop instructors, participating artists, all the different people involved in your project, who they are, what their background is. Then also a project budget. The letter of good standing from the Secretary of State saying that you are a nonprofit organization in good standing. So that is accessible online from the Secretary of State's office. And there are details in the grant guidelines about how to go about getting that with like click-by-click instructions. And then you can also add up to 5 supplemental materials, up to 5 photos, and then media samples are encouraged but not required, as well as video, and if applicable, your 501c3 letter. So how funding decisions, or before I go into the panel process, does anybody have any questions at this point? All good for now? Great. Okay, so the panel process. Our panel will happen towards the end of July. It all happens online. It's made up of community members, representative of the great diversity of our city, of the different artistic practices, different communities, and with the administrative expertise to be able to read and compare all these applications, in a objective and professional manner. So we have policies in place to avoid conflicts of interest. So, no one that's applying can be on the panel. And we are also right now recruiting for panelists, both for this program and also for another granting program. So Daniel, if you could put the link in the chat, you can nominate yourself to be a panelist. Obviously, if you're applying for this program, you would not be on this panel, but you could serve on a different program panel. Or if there is anyone that who you think would be a great person to be making these decisions about who gets this funding, you can nominate them to be a panelist as well there. So as I said, the panel reviews applications online and makes funding recommendations to go to the city. And that process will be done by the end of July. And then you can reach out to me to get funding recommendations and also get feedback from the panel. And the amount of these grants, the More Joy grants, are all $3,500. So either you will get funded for $3,500 or you won't. There's no variable amounts of money. Okay, so the evaluation criteria. So for More Joy, these are the evaluation criteria. So these are the things you want to keep in mind as you're writing your narrative for your proposal. So 40% is cultural relevance, recognition, education, and celebration of Indigenous cultures and local traditions reflected through a track record of successful programming and services. 30% is artistic quality, which is the artistic excellence and value of the programs and services that the organization offers to its community, contribution to the understanding or appreciation of the traditions. And then 30% is need and impact. So how the organization's programs and services are fulfilling a need in its community and how impactful they are. So those are the criteria that panelists will be looking at when judging your application. And then the final report. So you receive a grant, you get the funding, you put on your programs. At the end of the year, or after your program is over, you'll need to send us a final report to receive that last 25% payment of your grant. So we have simplified this over the years. It's pretty straightforward. We really want to make this as accessible as we can. So it's pretty brief. You describe what activities you did, how you spent the money, just in a narrative. You don't need to submit, receipts anymore or anything like that. You need to upload some images of your program for us to use in the future. And then you also need to upload proof that you acknowledge the grant in your promotional materials by including both the City of New Orleans logo and the Arts New Orleans logo. So those are the things that will be a part of that final report. And if as you're going through this process, you have any more questions about sort of what that final report will look like, I'm happy to answer those at any time. So you can be keeping track of the things you want to make sure you tell us at the end of the year. And then just a note about standards for financial management. So grantees and organizations serving as fiscal agents for a grant need to comply with generally accepted accounting principles. So this money should be held separately and tracked separately from other funds. So, you're going to have to, you can only use these funds for the purpose you applied for. And so you need to make sure that you're tracking that separately as you go. Great. So then just some grant writing tips for putting together a proposal really quickly. Assume that the panelists don't know anything about your organization. It's New Orleans, it's small. We're all aware of a lot of things happening in the city, so they very well might, but it's always a good practice to assume that they don't know and explain exactly what you do in clear and concise terms. So start early, don't leave it to the last minute in case, you run into any hiccups about having all your information together or figuring out your submittable account or anything like that. You can always reach out to me with questions. My contact information will be at the end of this presentation, and it's also all over the grant making section of our website now, which is artsneworleans.org. Double check everything, make sure that your narrative, what you're spelling out you're going to do, matches the budget you submit. If there's a band in the budget, you should say that there's a band in the narrative. And be clear and concise and understandable about your impact and your need and why your program is important. And then save a draft copy for review before you submit it. Another little tip trick I like is called the brother-in-law test. So having someone who is not necessarily familiar with your programming, read it and see if they can understand it before you submit it is a helpful thing to do. So those are just some tips, and I'm always happy to, if you have any questions as you're going through, please reach out. So these are just some examples of previous More Joy grantees. So we have Black Men of Labor, Crew of Red Beans, a program that Newcomb Art Museum did with some Black Massing Indians to bring their suits into the museum. Lots of different great programs we've been able to fund over the years. So this is my contact information if you want to take it down. I've emailed you all already. I'll do it again with the recording of this. And as I said, it's on the website as well. So reach out to me if you have any questions at all. And then I did want to mention, or actually does anybody have questions at this point? No?
Yes, I do.
Mhm.
I filled out my final report for 2022 a few months ago because there was confusion. Maybe Daniel knows more about it. How do I go about finishing that up? Is that something that I should talk to you over the phone, or is this a question?
Yeah, we can talk over the phone. I emailed you yesterday. There's a couple edits that are needed to your final report. So you should have gotten an email from Submittable to go in and make those edits. So I'll follow up with you. I'll give you a call once we get off of here and we can talk that through more. Does
Okay.
it sound good?
All right, thanks.
Great. Anybody else?
Hi.
Mhm.
I have a quick question. I know you guys have like a couple grants going on right now. I was just wondering if so this is my thing. I'm a musician based in New Orleans, and I a year ago switched a little bit careers and turned, well, not switch, added like a web developer career to my life, and so I developed this app which is built for musicians to get hired. You can sign up as a venue as a musician. So it's a simplified the way musicians get contracts and find gigs around town. And we planning on extending, like doing like worldwide. But I was just wondering if this is a grant that I can suit for that kind of stuff.
No, this grant is really specifically just for
Okay.
supporting street parading tradition.
Awesome. So I signed down also for the next grant. I think the next meeting is the May 24.
Yeah, on Friday for Louisiana Project Grants.
Awesome. I'm just gonna, do you think that's gonna fit for that one too?
Are you a nonprofit?
No.
Then probably not. Or if you were working, unless you're working with a fiscal sponsor, but that is.
Yeah.
I would need to see a few more details about your project and sort of exactly how that's operating. So if you want to send me an email or give me a call, we can talk about that specifically if it might fit.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure right now. So
yeah, I just actually started like drafting an email for you last night. I'm gonna send it later today for you.
Great. And that is actually a great segue into my last slide. I wanted to mention that we do have another grant opportunity open right now, which are Louisiana Project Grants. So those are arts projects. It can be an individual working on a project with a fiscal sponsor, or it can be an organization. And those are state-funded grants. So it's a little bit different process and procedure on those grants. But those are also open right now if that is something that might work for your project you're thinking about. And that deadline is July 1st. So Daniel, can you put a link in the chat to that as well? And I'll be doing another one of these sort of info sessions on Friday about that process if it's something that's of interest to anybody. So yeah, any other questions? Is there something in the chat? Let me just check. Yeah, great. Thanks, Daniel, for catching that question. Yeah, the grant award is $3,500. So great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And if you think of any questions later, please reach out to me. And it's been great to have you all here.